Hey gamers, if you're into 2D action platformer games, you've come to the right place. In this video, we're going to show you top 25 best 2D action platformer games that aren't just fun, but actually deliver solid gameplay, strong style, and experiences that still hold up right now. And I know some of you maybe disagree with the ranking, but that's okay. All I know, these game is a good game. Alright then, without further ado, let's get started. Starting with Abathor is a classic arcade game thrown into the modern era. Yup, this game drops you into an Atlantis on the edge of collapse, packed with demons, orichalcum-powered technology, and that old-school fantasy vibe that actually looks really damn good for a retro indie game. The story itself isn't super deep or anything, but it does its job well enough to push these four heroes into sealing the gates of Abathor before the whole world goes downhill. You've got 4 different characters to choose from, and thankfully, they don't just feel like lazy reskins. Each one has different stats and fighting styles. The upgrade system using orichalcum also keeps each run feeling stronger over time, so if you're into co-op action platformers, this one's honestly worth checking out. Shadow of the Ninja Reborn is way more fun in co-op than playing solo. The movement isn't crazy fast like Ninja Gaiden or most modern platformers. Every attack has commitment, jumps feel heavy, and the combat is a lot more methodical, but honestly that's exactly why the co-op works so damn well, because you actually gotta think about positioning, timing, and when to push forward or cover your teammate. The weapon system with the sword and chain also makes teamwork feel legit. One person can stay aggressive up close with the sword while the other controls space and keeps enemies in check with the chain. A lot of sections that feel annoying solo suddenly become way more enjoyable in co-op since you can back each other up and come up with little strategies in the middle of all the enemy madness. Yeah, I definitely prefer playing this one co-op with your girlfriend. Well, you know, if you actually have one. Kaze and the Wild Masks is one of the most solid modern retro action platformers that inspired by Donkey Kong Country game. You play as a rabbit girl named Kaze trying to save her friend while dealing with a curse spreading across the world. And just like the title says, the Wild Masks are one of the coolest parts of the game. Each mask gives you different transformations, and they actually keep the gameplay feeling fresh the whole time instead of turning into the same thing over and over. What makes Kaze way more enjoyable than a lot of old school retro platformers is the difficulty balancing. The game is still challenging, but it doesn't feel like it's actively trying to piss you off every 5 minutes. Unlimited lives, generous checkpoints, and bonus challenges you can retry instantly without replaying the whole level make the experience feel much fairer compared to some SNES classics that were honestly kind of ridiculous sometimes. Vengeful Guardian Moonrider is a retro action platformer where you play as Moonrider, a cyber ninja soldier originally created to be a weapon for a brutal authoritarian government. But instead of obeying orders, Moonrider goes rogue and turns against the very people who created him. So throughout the game, you'll be tearing through soldiers, mutants, and other biomechanical warriors in a full-on revenge mission to destroy the organization behind it all. The game is also way more approachable compared to old-school ninja platformers that usually feel stiff and hardcore as hell, so new players can jump in pretty easily. The problem is, the longer you play, the more it feels like the game plays things a little too safe. There are a lot of cool mechanics with real potential, but the level design and boss fights rarely evolve into anything truly challenging or memorable. And that doesn't make the game bad at all. Honestly, it's still pretty damn fun from start to finish. If you're into action platformers and grew up loving Contra like I did, then you seriously gotta try Iron Meat. The story is pretty wild. A failed experiment on the moon opens a portal that unleashes grotesque monsters onto Earth. Cities, machines, military bases, everything gets fused into these disgusting meat and metal abominations. You play as Vadim, just a regular soldier whose only job is to keep pushing forward and unload bullets into literally anything that moves. Gameplay-wise, this is straight up classic Contra energy. You run, jump, and shoot in 8 directions while enemies swarm you from every damn angle. The pacing is fast, aggressive, and constantly keeps you moving. Stand still for 2 seconds and yeah, you're probably dead. What makes it even crazier is that Iron Meat was made by just one developer. This game completely understands why old school arcade shooters were so addictive without trying too hard to become some overly modern version of itself. Ghosts and Goblins Ressurrection is honestly a damn good comeback for the classic series. Capcom somehow managed to modernize the visuals without ruining the old school identity that made the franchise famous for being ridiculously punishing. But underneath the colorful fairy tale look, this game is still ruthless as hell. Enemies keep spawning from every direction, traps love screwing you over, and Arthur still controls like an old arcade character. It gets frustrating sometimes, but that's also what makes finally beating a stage feel so satisfying. Thankfully, Ressurrection is way more forgiving than the older games thanks to all the difficulty options. New players can actually enjoy the game without wanting to throw their controller across the room, while hardcore fans still get the insanely punishing legend mode. The weapon and magic system also adds a lot more variety since every weapon works better depending on the situation and level design. Honestly, that was a smart move because the old Ghosts and Goblins games were infamous for being way too unforgiving for a lot of people. Guns, Gore, and Canoli 2 doesn't really reinvent anything from the first game, but honestly, the core gameplay was already fun as hell to begin with. It's still a non-stop run-and-gun action platformer packed with explosions, zombies, mobsters, Nazis, mutants, and ridiculous amounts of gore from start to finish. The weapon variety is awesome too. You've got pistols, shotguns, Tommy guns, rocket launchers, chainsaws, basically everything you need to turn the screen into a bloody mess. And a lot of the environments can be used to kill enemies in creative ways, which keeps the combat entertaining the whole time. That said, as a sequel, it doesn't feel like a huge evolution over the first game. A lot of the mechanics feel familiar, the boss fights aren't super memorable, and the campaign is pretty short at around 3 hours. Still, the replay value gets a nice boost from the difficulty options and especially the co-op, which is way more fun with friends. Megaman 11 is like comeback that finally made the classic Megaman series feel alive again. And thankfully, Capcom didn't just rely on nostalgia bait to carry the game. The gameplay still sticks to that old school action platformer formula. But this time, Capcom added the double gear system, which easily becomes the biggest highlight of the game. This new mechanic lets Mega Man slow down time with speed gear or boost his firepower with power gear, and honestly, it makes the gameplay way more intense and dynamic. A lot of the platforming sections and boss fights are clearly designed around it, so the game feels modern without losing that classic Mega Man feel. The disappointing part is definitely the soundtrack. For a franchise known for having ridiculously iconic music, Mega Man 11's soundtrack just doesn't hit that hard. Most of the tracks are fine, but barely memorable compared to the older games. Still, overall, Mega Man 11 is a really fun action platformer that brings back that classic Mega Man nostalgia without feeling outdated. Sanabi is an action platformer that quietly builds up emotional weight, flips your expectations halfway through, and leaves a lasting impression that goes way beyond just being a fun game. Even after you finish it, there's this weird, empty feeling, like you just got done with something heavy but really well made. Yeah, in this game you play as a retired war veteran. At first he's shown as a father trying to live a peaceful life with his daughter, far away from all the chaos of his past. He genuinely wants to leave that life behind for good until one major incident drags him straight back into the world he tried to bury. After that, his identity shifts hard. He becomes a former soldier again, now equipped with a high-tech prosthetic arm, tearing through a futuristic city while hunting down something called Sanabi. As for the gameplay, there's really no need to sugarcoat it. It hits. If you're into action platformers, this one is absolutely worth checking out. Neon Inferno is one of those retro-style run-and-gun action platformers that actually manages to stand out in the middle of a pixel art wave that all starts to feel the same after a while. It looks like another neon cyberpunk throwback shooter, but once you actually play it, the mechanics hit way harder than expected. The shooting feels tight, movement is smooth, and the pacing stays aggressive without ever getting out of control. What really sets it apart is the parry and bullet time system. You can deflect incoming shots, trigger a brief slowdown, and redirect those bullets straight back into enemies. Yup, it actually makes combat feel more involved instead of just holding the fire button and hoping for the best. There's also a background shooting mechanic inspired by wild guns. Enemies appear in the background too, so you fight in front while aiming at targets behind at the same time. It feels hectic at first, but it becomes fun once you get used to it. Cyber Shadow is a retro ninja action throwback that hits hard on that old NES era, especially if you grew up missing that Ninja Gaiden style energy. The gameplay isn't just mindless running and slicing through enemies, it's more like a chain of tight little challenges where every section is testing your timing, reflexes, and how well you read enemy patterns. Both the platforming and boss fights bring their own pressure, so you're constantly adapting instead of coasting through. There's also the parry system, which honestly stands out a lot. If your timing is on point, you can deflect incoming attacks and turn them into energy balls, then send them right back as strong counterattacks. It's not just a side mechanic, it actually changes how you approach fights, especially since it's risky but rewarding. And honestly, this kind of mechanic is still pretty rare in modern 2D platformers, which is exactly why it feels fresh and a bit ahead of its time. Blazing Chrome is one of those Contra-style action platformers I really enjoyed back in the day. The game also has a pretty high difficulty level. Enemies constantly show up in large numbers and from multiple directions at once, which really tightens your movement space. Boss fights are also pretty long and will punish you hard if you're slow at reading attack patterns. Even on normal difficulty, the game can feel pretty intense. From a gameplay standpoint, the shooting feel is one of its strongest points. There's auto-fire, plus an option to shoot while standing still so you can aim more precisely. Movement isn't complicated, but it's flexible enough to help you dodge bullets and deal with enemies that pop up out of nowhere. All in all, Blazing Chrome nails that modern Contra feel really well. Tight controls, strong atmosphere, and a retro presentation that absolutely delivers. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is the complete version of Shovel Knight you can get. It's not just one game, it's a whole bundle of different campaigns, and each one plays in its own style. So instead of being a single experience, it feels more like a full package with a lot of variety packed in. The design quality stays consistently solid from start to finish, including all the expansions. This isn't just some retro pixel nostalgia bait, and yeah, there's a lot of content here. You get multiple campaigns, each with a different character, and they don't just swap skins or small mechanics. They actually change how the game plays in a big way. Shovel Knight is the more basic, classic style one. Plague Knight goes more experimental and weird with movement and combat. Spectre Knight is faster, sharper, and way more technical, almost like the game is daring you to keep up. So you're basically getting several different flavors of action platforming in one game, not just a single repetitive loop. Contra Operation Galuga is a comeback of a classic run-and-gun series that sticks closely to its original DNA, but gets a modern touch to make it more approachable for new players. And the cool part is, you can play co-op with up to 4 players. Honestly, nice move from Konami. Weapons are one of the biggest highlights here. You've got iconic stuff like the spread shot, laser, flamethrower, and homing rocket. Each one has its own role depending on the situation. There's also a perk shop system where you can spend credits earned from playing to unlock permanent upgrades. This helps reduce frustration quite a bit, like starting a level with a specific weapon or making overload skills more useful. Even though the main campaign is pretty short, only around 8 stages that you can finish in a few hours, the game still has replay value. That's mostly thanks to the character variety. Each character has unique abilities like grappling or hovering as a robot, even if the differences between them aren't that huge. Rayman Legends can basically be seen as a step up from Rayman Origins, but it still keeps that same vibe. A colorful platformer that looks light and fun, but actually hits you with some serious challenge once you get deeper into the later stages. Progression in this game isn't linear. To unlock new levels, you don't just clear stages, you also need to collect stuff like teensies. That means you'll often end up going back to previous levels if you missed anything. It makes the replay value pretty high since every level hides a lot of secrets. The game also comes packed with extra content, bonus stages, new characters, and even reworked levels from Rayman Origins. On top of that, there are daily and weekly challenges, plus a co-op mode for up to 4 players that can turn everything into total chaos in the best way. Yeah, this isn't just nostalgia bait, it's a game built with real attention to detail, where every level actually feels like it has its own identity. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is still one of those games with a really strong identity when it comes to challenge and level design in the action platformer genre. This game seriously does not mess around. It constantly puts pressure on you with traps, tight timing, and reflex-heavy sections that will absolutely punish you if you lose focus for even a second. But this version also adds an optional mode that makes things a bit less painful. You can play with a character that has extra abilities, which makes small mistakes way less punishing. You get extra protection from hazards, safer jumps, and more hearts in every level. So instead of feeling completely miserable every few minutes, the game actually gives you a little breathing room without removing the challenge entirely. And the boss fights are honestly damn memorable too. Most of them feel overwhelming at first, like the game is just bullying you non-stop, but after dying a couple times, you slowly start reading their patterns better. Mark of the Ninja Remastered is described as a stealth action platformer that absolutely nails the feeling of being a badass ninja assassin. Even for people who normally don't care much about stealth games, this one still feels really fun because the gameplay focuses more on player freedom and a smooth overall flow. The story starts when a ninja village gets attacked by soldiers armed with modern weapons. The main character becomes one of the clan's last hopes after receiving mystical tattoos that grant incredible power. From there, you go through a journey filled with infiltration, silent kills, sabotage, and attempts to save the clan from a massive threat. The gameplay is extremely flexible since almost every situation can be approached in different ways. Tales of Iron is a 2D action RPG with a dark fantasy vibe that focuses on challenging combat and a revenge-driven story. As an action platformer, the gameplay is heavily focused on timing during combat. You need to read enemy attacks and figure out when to dodge, block, or parry. The combat feels responsive and keeps evolving as you progress, since you'll unlock different weapons, armor sets, heavy weapons, and ranged gear that can match your playstyle. Even though the game looks like some animal fairy tale at first glance, the tone is actually pretty dark. It deals with war, loss, leadership, and revenge throughout the story. The campaign itself isn't very long, but the brutal world, satisfying combat, and strong dark fantasy atmosphere are easily the game's biggest strengths. Huntdown is a retro-style run-and-gun game that really leans hard into style and fast-paced gameplay. Story-wise, the world in Huntdown has completely gone to hell and is controlled by criminal gangs. A lot of people end up joining either the authorities or the gangs just to survive. The main characters we play as are bounty hunters hired to wipe out the gang leaders and bring at least a little bit of peace back to the city. One thing that makes the gameplay stand out is the cover system. Enemies come at you hard from every direction, so you'll need to hide behind objects before jumping back out to return fire. It makes the combat feel way more tactical compared to your usual run-and-gun game. There are also 3 playable characters, and each one starts with different default weapons. And yeah, the combat feels insanely satisfying because the explosions and gore are super over the top, especially when enemies get blown apart with explosives. Yup, for me this game is seriously fun and memorable as hell, but I don't know about you guys. The Messenger is ninja action platformer that seriously I think everyone should play. If you've never touched this game before, man, you're missing out hard as a gamer. At the beginning, the gameplay is focused on linear action platforming. Your character runs, jumps, and attacks like a classic old school ninja. But as you keep playing, you unlock more abilities that make the movement way faster and more flexible. That's when the game really starts building its own identity instead of just feeling like another retro copycat. The problem starts showing up around the middle of the game though. At that point, the Messenger suddenly switches genres from a linear action platformer into a Metroidvania. You end up getting forced to backtrack through old areas, doing fetch quests, and hunting down specific items. Even with that, the difficulty still feels fair. You're probably gonna die a lot, but the game still gives you that really satisfying feeling whenever you finally overcome a tough challenge. Terminator 2D No Fate is a 90s-style arcade side-scrolling run-and-gun made as a tribute to classic games from the Terminator 2 Judgment Day era. The story follows the movie pretty closely, with some extra Future War missions added in. You play as iconic characters from the film while blasting enemies through linear stages until you reach the boss fights. The combat uses 8-direction shooting with different weapon pickups like shotguns, spread shots, and lasers. Every weapon has unlimited ammo and never needs reloading, but special weapons only last for a limited time. The game also doesn't just stick to running and shooting the whole time. There are a few gameplay changes to keep things from getting repetitive. One of them is a driving section inspired by the truck versus motorcycle chase scene from the movie. There's also a beat-em-up section in the biker bar where Arnold shows up completely naked, with his private parts hilariously pixelated out for obvious reasons. Katana ZERO is a side-scrolling cyberpunk samurai action platformer that a lot of people still consider one of the coolest indie games in the genre. Even though it came out back in 2019, people still talk about it because the fast gameplay, brutal combat, dodge timing, slow-motion mechanics, and precise platforming still feel insanely solid. The story is also way above the average action platformer. Most games like this usually only focus on gameplay, but Katana ZERO actually has a mysterious story, great dialogue, and a psychological atmosphere that keeps making you think about what the hell is really going on. What makes this game special to me is how every level keeps introducing new ideas. Right when you start getting comfortable with one mechanic, the game throws in new enemy types, new stage gimmicks, boss fights, or story moments that keep you hooked. And why am I still talking about Katana ZERO? Because for me, this is the greatest action platformer ever made. Yeah, action platformer, not a Metroidvania, and definitely not a roguelike. A long-awaited cyberpunk action platformer with cinematic pixel visuals finally arrived after years of hype and delays, and it mostly delivers on story, world building, and presentation. Replaced puts you in control of Reach, an AI trapped inside the body of a scientist named Warren Marsh after a lab accident. After escaping the facility, Reach uncovers a darker world outside the city, where corporations run illegal organ harvesting operations tied to kidnappings and hidden control systems. The story focuses on identity, consciousness, and power abuse, giving it a more thoughtful tone than most games in the genre. Gameplay mixes platforming and combat with a system built around dodging, parrying, and reading enemy attacks. It can feel a bit inconsistent at times, especially in tougher fights. Even so, the game's pixel art, lighting, animation, and soundtrack carry the experience hard, making the cyberpunk atmosphere its strongest hook. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound is the kind of game that brings back the classic Ninja Gaiden vibe while making everything feel way smoother and more modern. The story follows a new character named Kenji Mozu, a student of Ryu Hayabusa. While Ryu heads off to America, which is a direct callback to the classic NES Ninja Gaiden, Kenji ends up defending Hayabusa village from a demon invasion. Combat is easily the biggest highlight here. Kenji fights with a katana while Kumori brings kunai and extra weapons like sickles and chakrams into the mix. The combat system is fast, aggressive, and heavily relies on reflexes and positioning. Even though the movesets aren't massive, the way both characters' abilities work together keeps fights feeling varied and fun as hell. The boss fights are also fantastic, forcing players to really learn the game's mechanics instead of just button mashing through everything. The pixel art visuals and retro modern soundtrack are insanely good, while the level design is packed with secrets and collectibles that make replaying stages genuinely worth it. Shinobi Art of Vengeance is described as a really solid comeback for the Shinobi series. The game manages to keep that classic Sega Genesis Shinobi identity alive while still feeling modern. The gameplay focuses on fast-paced action platforming with a mix of combat and platforming in every level. Combat is easily one of the game's biggest strengths because it feels smooth, has great impact, and the animations are insanely satisfying to watch. There's also ninpo abilities that can be used once your combo meter is filled. Each ninpo has a different function. Some deal massive damage, while others help fill up enemy execution gauges faster. And even though it's not a full Metroidvania, the game has a lot of backtracking elements. Many areas in earlier stages can't be accessed until players unlock specific gear like climbing claws, grappling hooks, or abilities that let you break special floors. The music is also really damn good because it doesn't just rely on retro nostalgia. It has its own identity while still keeping that classic Shinobi vibe intact. And that's it for today. Those were lists the top 25 best action platformer games you can play right now. Got a hidden gem I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video or discovered a new title to add to your collection, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss future content. Once again, if you want to buy games with cheap price, the link in the description okay, so thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.